thank you, Andrew. As you said, we have the cow-calf operation in East Central Alberta, and that's augmented by a boxed beef program that we sell around Alberta under the Neilson Beef brand. And then, we do a lot of stuff with Olds College, and that's been a relationship for the last 4 or 5 years. And with that, we get some access to some neat new technology and new relationships, and it keeps us on the cutting edge. You come to a place like this, and crops get all the excitement, right? There's one booth from One Cup AI who we have a relationship with, but everything else is for cattle. So you kind of feel like the forgotten sector when it comes to precision and technology. Is there a way to click to the next slide?
Right there.
Or what do I? The square clicker? What does that mean? Oh.
I don't have it. Yep. There you go. We'll get you there.
There we go. Okay.
There you go.
Okay. So go to the next one here. So we do some low-tech things that we're able to verify through some high-tech methods. So some of the projects with Olds College is improving fertility in heifers, breeding heifers, just through handling techniques. And so we just basically give them good experiences, and when handling them through your chute and handling facility, and we see significant improvements to fertility. 10% increases in conception rates, and just an easier to handle female, and we do that through assessing temperament scores. And so, you might have seen the presentation from One Cup AI that's here. It's our facial recognition for livestock. And so we have One Cup cameras at our place, and we're actually in the process of standardizing temperament scores with them. Instead of it being a person at chute side given a score, and that's subjective. Unless you have the same person at everybody's chute side, you're not going to have a consistent score. So we're in the process of helping the One Cup cameras make a standardized temperament assessment, and that also includes flight speed when they exit your squeeze. It includes how excitable they are when they're in the squeeze, those sort of things, and those are big indicators to fertility. Next project we do is different weaning methods, and those kind of sounds like they've been done to death a lot of times. There's a different you got your standard abrupt weaning, fence line weaning, and nose paddles, and we've done a couple years of different weaning methods, and again we're in the process with understanding behavior with One Cup cameras, understanding a little more of the overall behavior of cattle, but we're able to, the previous few years we've weighed them and recorded sicknesses and stuff, and there's been some interesting results there. Things that people thought were more humane treatment of cattle certainly don't bear that out in the results. This is probably the most interesting. If you find our TikTok page, this one's got a few 100,000 views of my wife massaging calves. That's still pictures from a video that I posted on TikTok. And so we'll do these, we calve out about 250 cows, and we massaged every second calf, every second steer, every second heifer born. And we massage them for 1 minute when we tag them. So we'll tag them, needle them, do all the things to them, and then afterwards we massage them for 1 minute. And so we did that with every second one. So you got a control group, and you have a massage group. And we saw 45 pounds extra weaning on the massaged heifer group, not the steer group. And I think that has to do with banding and stuff, which we're making some adjustments this year. But those are some really interesting things that we do. And then, one of the new projects we're working on is virtual fencing collars. And this is one of the things that, we just, because we have a relationship with Olds, and, it puts us in positions to be on the cutting edge of everything. So, we're in the process of doing a winter trial here with some collars that we've adapted from actually another country, a Norwegian company. We're kind of trying to adapt them to Canadian environments to test out, a product to build for a made in Alberta solution. But we're doing some winter grazing trials, and we have some pretty interesting people on board as far as, the people that could make this, a product to take, this is something that we can actually take to a cow-calf producer in Canada and turn it into a success story at a lower cost. The university, it got me thinking, that University of Saskatchewan professor that was here beforehand, talking about different soil zones or different parts of fields should not be cropped maybe. If we had good ways to utilize those areas, and, this is where cattle need to find a niche market, and they need to find something to create some excitement again. The cow-calf sector's been hit pretty hard the past 10 years. So, I'm hoping things like the virtual fencing collars, if we can make a made in Alberta solution that can, withstand our climate and withstand the unique things that Canada has to offer. I think these are pretty exciting moments for the cattle industry, and I hope in a couple of years when we come to Precision Ag Conference, there's more than one booth for cow-calf guys, because I think we need that. So it's I think we're a unique operation for cow-calf. I don't think there's very many people like us that kind of dedicate our herd and dedicate our cattle to different projects. We kind of give Olds College free rein, so long as it doesn't interfere with our operation. It doesn't add too much workload. It's got to be reasonable, because if it's not reasonable for us to do in this environment, it's not going to be reasonable for anybody to do. So it has to be reasonable. But it's a niche that we have found that's pretty exciting. It becomes addicting too, right? You get on one path and it snowballs to another one. It becomes a little bit addicting to see what's next. And yeah, it's quite exciting for us. And on the fenceless grazing front, this is one of the more exciting things that I've come across, and I'm definitely, the next couple of years are going to be pretty neat for the cattle guy. So yeah, that's our spiel on our farm. It's not anything different than any other cow-calf operation, except we like to experiment and we value that relationship with the college. So there's my contact info or social media following if you want to follow some of the interesting things we do.
Awesome, that's great. Thanks, Lance. Next, just because we had these in alphabetical order, but I can see that there's a different screen up there. So, so next was going to be Will Van Roessel. Will, together with his wife Jean, operate a specialty Seeds Ltd, an irrigated farm near Bow Island in Alberta. Most of the farm is dedicated to seed production, with hybrid canola contracted with several companies being their main crop. They also grow market spring wheat, winter wheat, durum, hybrid rye, yellow peas, and hemp. They trade land with other farmers who grow potatoes, sugar beets, and edible beans on their fields, while Will and Jean grow hybrid canola on their fields. The technologies they use on the farm include auto steer, section control, satellite imagery, yield maps, and some variable rate irrigation. Go ahead, Will.
All right, thank you, Andrew. Yeah, so let's see if we can manage this. There we go. Okay, so this was part of our introduction. We basically grow hybrid canola seed and hemp, contract for other companies, and fall rye, spring wheat, durum, winter wheat, and yellow peas that we grow for retail sales to our own customers. So like most farmers, we started into precision ag, buying a light bar just so we could drive a little bit straighter and not have to pull those, pesky disc markers with the sprayer and some of those things. And then gradually moved into auto steer, and then, the ability to paint on the screen, to show your coverage maps. And then moved into swath control, mostly for spraying. That was a big benefit, especially when we're spraying pivot corners, which are like triangles. You end up with a lot of overlaps there. We got into a bit of variable rate fertilizer, but mostly we just do it manually. We do most of our nitrogen fertilizer with seeding as liquid, and so we have a liquid controller on the drill, which is basically the same as a controller on our sprayer. So we use the same technology in the tractor to operate the liquid fertilizer system. And we just have for most fields, we'd have 3 rates set on the display unit. And if we were happy, in some cases, we'll seed the dryland corners at the same crop as we do on the circle. Not very often, but occasionally we will, and then we'll use a dryland rate for that crop, and then we'll maybe have a moderate rate for some places in the field where we know there's salinity problems or some other things where we'll just use a lower rate of nitrogen fertilizer. We haven't done any variable rate of phosphate fertilizer or anything on variable rate seeding. Then the next step, we went into yield mapping with more modern combines. We were able to get yield maps, and to me, that's the most interesting part of this whole program. Although, unfortunately, by the time you get the yield map, there's nothing you can do about fixing any problems you might have had. We've done a little bit of work with variable rate irrigation, mostly just shutting off sections of a pivot and going through low spots just to prevent drowning. There's lots of room for improvement yet in that technology. A little bit of experience with remote soil monitoring, and then also want to talk a little bit about satellite imagery. But one thing I want to say, on our farm, we have relatively small acres compared to like some of our dryland neighbors. So we do small acres, especially of some of the crops. So new technology that's priced or sold to us on a per acre basis is easier to justify than technology that's sold kind of on a farm basis or on a machine basis. So it's harder for us to justify buying a new drill with variable rate seeding control because we might only be doing 1,000 acres with that. But it's easier to justify something like satellite imagery, which might only be a certain amount per acre, because we're investing per acre and not investing a large amount on the farm and trying to divide it out over those acres. So I'll show you a few colorful pictures. This was in the early days of trying to set up something for variable rate irrigation. Excuse me. And my brother grows potatoes, and we swap land for potatoes. So he had this map done by somebody, and this is soil moisture holding capacity, and then also a topographical map of the field, and we tried to use that image or that information to set up variable rate irrigation. But also for that field, I went back and looked at some Google images, or Google Earth, and we had a Google Earth image of a very wet year when we grew hemp on that field, and hemp is very susceptible to drowning. So it shows exactly where all the low spots are. So sometimes information you get on something like Google Earth, which is free, can be more useful than anything that you spend money trying to develop. We use excuse me, remote monitoring. It's a valley irrigation system, and it allows us, to start and stop machines and see what's going on, from our phones, and that's been pretty valuable. This is an example of an AquaSpy soil moisture probe. So you plant this out in the field, and it you can check it on your phone. Gives live data of soil moisture at different levels. So, for example, if you look on the chart, the blue line, the one that goes, varies the most up and down, that's the one at 8-inch depth. And so you can tell every time that it either rained or it irrigated, the soil moisture at 8 inches came up significantly. So that's one of the ways that we use to monitor soil levels in the field. So then we got into satellite imagery. So it's very useful for checking the performance of irrigation equipment. So if you have some plug sprinklers or something like that, you can usually see it on a satellite imagery, and you can probably correct it before a lot of significant damage is done. And hopefully you can get to it before it looks like this. This is a field, and hopefully the farmer who owns this field isn't in the room, because he might feel a bit embarrassed about it. But you can see a lot of issues there with poor water distribution in that particular pivot circle. So hopefully satellite imagery would alert you to a problem before it got to this stage. Satellite imagery is good for comparing varieties sometimes. So there's, this is actually a yield map. You can see there's a strip through there. It shows up here. I've outlined it in black where the yield is a little bit higher. So that's comparing one variety to another. Satellite imagery, I thought it might be useful for predicting yield, but I haven't always found that to be the case. Here's an example of a field this year, and if you see over here, there's significant area with poorer crop production, and over here in the top corner and all the way down along the south side, some areas where you would think there's some problem with that crop and it's not likely to yield as well. And this image looked the same over a period of about a month. Like it wasn't just a one-time event that it looked like that. But then looking over at the yield map, the yield is actually relatively uniform throughout that field, much more uniform than what we would have predicted looking at the satellite imagery. There is a couple areas here with low yields that do correlate, with the poor areas over on the satellite image, but it's not near as big as what you would expect. Oh, stuck. Okay, here's another same thing, satellite image and yield map, and this actually. If you look at the first one, the satellite image, it shows a really poor area down here, and the rest of the field reasonably uniform. The yield map over here, you got the same low yielding area, so that kind of matches. But there's a whole area here that's where the yield is significantly higher, which doesn't actually show up on the satellite image. And I'm not sure why that is, but that was a field where the crop the previous year was slightly different. It was a plot of a different crop in that area, so different nutrients or different crop rotation. So it showed up on the yield map, but it never showed up during the whole season on the satellite image. As Andrew mentioned, one of our main crops is hybrid canola that we go for seed production. So in order to do seed production, we go alternating strips of male and female bays, and then they bring in leafcutter shelters. They're in all those orange or blue tents. And so the leafcutter shelters then move the pollen from the male bays into the female bays. The female plants are not fertile, so that's where the actual hybrid seed is produced. And then also bring in honeybees to also pollinate. And leafcutter bees and honeybees kind of both work under somewhat different environmental conditions. So there's an advantage to using both of those. And this is what the field looks like close to harvest. And so we don't always get ideal pollination. And so this is my favorite yield map of all. It shows some extreme variability. All the green areas are where the leafcutter shelters were. So in that particular field, most of the leafcutter bees only flew about 50 feet back and forth between the hive. And for some reason, they didn't cover the whole field. But there's a few other interesting things there. Let's see the area in the southwest corner where it's all uniformly green. When we first looked at that, we thought, well, that's probably because there was honeybees located right in this dryland corner right along the edge of the field. So that would maybe make sense that the honeybees didn't fly very far. But there was also honeybees in this corner. And so we don't have any yield increase in that corner because of the honeybee location. The only thing we can think of is that there was a yard here with trees, and maybe they were sheltered from the wind, or there were some other reasons why this particular area pollinated better than others. But this part of the field is a fairly high and dry area, so that, shouldn't have been a factor, but then so is this area also kind of high and dry. So there's a lot of things that went on in this field that we don't quite understand, and if we could figure out, how to deal with some of these pollination issues during the season, that would, really help our situation. And just to give you a ballpark number, the difference in return to us between a red area here and a green area like 50 feet away is probably over $1,000 an acre. So in a field like this, had we been able to get uniform pollination like we did in the southwest corner on the entire field, that would have probably resulted in an extra $100,000 of return for that field. So there's room for improvement in a lot of crop production technology, and I'm not sure how we can figure it all out yet.
Is that you? Are you done?
And that's it. Yeah.
All right. Thanks a lot. Will, next we'll have Greg Stamp come tell us about his operation. Greg's with Stamp Seeds. Stamp Seeds is a 7,000. Oh, might as well. Check. Made sure now. Get you all awake. Okay, so we'll go back to Greg. He heard this already, but Greg is with Stamp Seeds. Stamp Seeds is a 7,000-acre irrigated and dryland seed farm and seed retailer located in Alberta, owned by his brother Greg and Matthew and Nathan. The crops grown include faba beans, peas, lentils, corn, canola, feed and malt barley, winter wheat, hybrid rye, whole bunch more wheat, and hybrid seed canola. That was a lot. All right, go ahead. Oh, Greg's main role is on the farm includes seed sales, marketing, and customer support. Greg is a director with the Alberta Pulse Growers Commission, Pulse Canada. Greg has a diploma in Ag Tech from Lethbridge College and a Bachelor of Science from the University of Lethbridge, and is also a certified crop advisor. Greg, over to you.
Okay, thank you, Andrew. So yeah, myself and two brothers operate Stamp Seeds. Nathan's the farm manager. Matthew's some administrative office and seed cleaning, treating, processing, and I take care of seed sales. So my parents started the farm, just to give you an idea of where we kind of came from, I suppose. Right now, we've got 18 full-time employees, and then in season more. We would grow like 20 different kinds or types or varieties, or actually classes of crops, and then as many as 40 different varieties. And we do utilize some contract growers as well, where needed. And just from when I was thinking about who we report information to, how we utilize technology, there's 25 and more, like I had to stop counting, different entities that we report information to or enter information into something for them. So it does add up, and I'm sure Will would be the same way on his farm. So we would everything we do is targeting the seed production. We do also do a lot of small plots, so that is quite a bit of work. So as many as 15 different small plots that are 2.5 acres in size. And then, possibly in the future, doing a little bit more contract production of higher pedigree and setting up to do that better than we currently do. We're fairly spread out, so we would stretch from our home base probably halfway to Will's place, actually, the town of Hayes. So we're kind of 80 kilometers from one end to the other. It takes a little time to road machinery places, but that's where the opportunities were. Not all these fields on here are ours. Some of them are, say, a contract grower or land we've traded with a neighboring potato farmer, and we'll trade land with them on one-year terms. So some of these circles are not necessarily ours or that we rent. And so the one-year swaps does create some interesting things for precision ag and VR and things like that. So people that we work with, reporting, quality control, all these people or companies want information from us, whether it's from seed treating records to in-field reporting, to paperwork, reporting on what was grown and who grew it, to our bank, right? So that creates a lot of work, a lot of office work. We've got 3 people in the office, 2 full-time, 1 part-time, that deal with things from, we have a CFO that manages the finances part-time with us, and then we've got a front office person and an accountant full-time in the office. So how have things changed? So prior to getting a little bit better at recording things, there was a lot of hand-drawn maps as far as, that would be one of our more complicated fields, showing different varieties that were on a field and outlining where that is. But then, hand-drawn maps have room for error, and it's not ideal. So if you can get something, where you can actually draw it on a screen or go out to the field and get that information of what plots went where, that's great for record keeping. So where did we, how did we get to where we are today? So in 2007, when I came back to the farm, just kind of John Deere's Apex was out. So I started creating some yield maps using just Google Earth and field knowledge to create really basic prescriptions, and using some yield mapping to kind of do that. It was okay. And we were at the stage where we kind of had some time to do that as well. And then we went on a big growth phase from 2012 to 2017. So in 15 years, we've grown the farm 7x, and seed sales probably 10x. In that growth period, some things dropped off. So the precision ag a little bit, the VR became just like, we just don't have time for this, or the people. So we were doing less than before. And then thankfully my brothers came back to the farm, and we were hiring more staff, and took on some of those things and started hiring a few key things out. So getting the farm zones set for VR, and then adding VR irrigation on one pivot in 2014, just to see what we could do on one field, and then going away from manual record keeping to more digital, and then remote irrigation and some RTK field boundaries. So today, using zone maps and georeferenced soil sampling to get trends, we are averaging in that zone. So nitrogen and phos would be on separate prescriptions, so you could alter those through the drill. If it's a blend, it typically goes with the nitrogen. And then sectional control on the drill as well. And then the spin spreader, variable rate on that as well, and sectional, so we can water in fertilizer if we want to stretch our fills with the drill and speed up seeding a little bit. And then even some zones for some herbicides that would have some soil residual or deal with kochia, things like that. And then, so we're using John Deere's software for record keeping or uploading from machine operations, and but manual recording as well, because with how many different things we have going on the farm in the fields, then you've got just too much that the app can't accurately record things properly for you. So we kind of have to use two systems, so that's not ideal. And then now with remote irrigation management, all the pivots are on cell modems, so we can control them similar to Will. Start, stop. You still have to go check pivots, but one person can manage a lot more pivots. So we would have over 40 pivots that my brother's managing, and then you don't have to quite get to every single one as much as you would if you didn't have that. And even for the operators from the tractor, as they're seeding, they can move that pivot out of the way so they can seed on the other side. So it just kind of makes things a little easier. And using Western Tractor Services for some prescriptions and field services, we scale everything. So most of it would go across a truck scale before being binned and actually sampled and recorded what the temperature, bushel weight, moisture actually is before it hits a bin, so we can pick the proper bin. And if not, then the cart on the scale if it is going to a bin that's at a separate yard, which is actually kind of rare for us now. And then cloud-based inventory tracking and traceability, so all the cleaning products that go through our seed plant. So we could trace a product for 5 years through our farm, through our bins, through our cleaning facility, and know where that seed variety went and what bins it was in, and even the scale tickets, who actually transferred it. So challenges. You know, like some of the presentations today, it's like, okay, can we hit the easy button? Well, not always, right? So pulse crop sampling, you know, if you're going to put a pulse there, you're not using nitrogen. So typically we're sampling 1 in 3 years for soil sampling. I think benchmarking is pretty valuable, but there are times, so that's the key for that. But we're not sampling prior to a pulse crop typically because we're not going to vary that N. And then after, sometimes not as well, and often because we're going into a winter crop where quicker turnaround time and a little bit of just maybe you could use a standard prescription but not modify something on the fly like that because we're putting on that fall crop fertility in the fall typically. You know, the variable rate irrigation, how do you adjust that in season? Typically, you're just too busy to modify a prescription you might have on a pivot for that VR irrigation. I've got a picture the next couple slides here for that. The fall crop fertility, typically with hybrid rye, you want it in the fall. Well, how does that work with timelines, with the breakdown of that nutrient, of nitrogen prior to when you'd need to apply that? Pretty impossible timeline. So sometimes default prescriptions can work. Recording in 2 apps, that's not great. Manual data entry, that's, you know, we still do a lot of that between different systems. So that's a lot of work. Things aren't real connected. Staff shortages. If you could solve that problem, we'll spend more time on VR, right? As a farming industry, if you can help us with that, that will help us do the things that are more complicated on our farms, right? And seed variety data. I feel like we don't really know how products perform well across multiple environments in Western Canada for cereals, things like for cereals especially. So I think there's a real lack of information there. Non-linked machinery. You know, we've got a box drill. We see with a box drill still, if you can believe that. We do over 1,000 acres a year with a box drill. And, you know, so how do you record that data properly if that machine's not linking with the cloud like everything else? Land trading, lots of one-year deals. We may farm 500 to 700 acres of not our land randomly every fall, whatever's available first, so we can put a fall crop on there. Lots of rental lands. You know, we're over half rented. We're over 60% rented. So that's a challenge. How long do you have that land? The farm's complex. And then sometimes things in Excel are just easy to look at. And look at this picture I've got here. We've got all kinds of different demo plots, some high pedigree plots. How do you irrigate this? And then the outside edges of the field, there's some carriganas that are the landlord, the person we work with on this, he doesn't want us to run over those carriganas either. That's a no-no. So you can see this, sometimes charts just are simple and easy and are necessary. I don't know how do you get away from that on some things, but with rotations, it's nice to really see all your options. With the VR irrigation, so the top right corner there, we've got a field where my brother was part of a project with soil sensors, upslope, midslope, downslope. How can those soil moisture sensors dictate what your map for your next irrigation is going to look like? So they're trying to figure out how do you model soil sampling and soil moisture sensors to build a prescription for that next pass on that pivot and kind of try and automate things a little bit better. Here's just an image showing how you transfer products in and out of bins. So you've got your inventory and always live on bookings inventory, things like that. Yield trials, trying to do more of that so we can get a better picture, but that is a lot of work, an impossible amount of work. But put it through a weigh wagon, know actually what you're dealing with in your situation. Even before we grow the varieties. There's some varieties we put through here that we're not growing and decide, well, should we not? And then you've got some good information on the variety if you decide to. The grasshopper map, right? How can you be selective on what you're spraying, when you're spraying it, and show someone that you use products responsibly. And Operation Kosha. So far right, we took some land that was tough land and took it out of production and put it into grass because it just wasn't producing. It needs some time to maybe drain or get rid of some salts. So took that out of there, put authority in just different spots in the field, increase the seeding rate in some of those tough areas. I find that in poor areas, upping the rate can actually, you don't get a lot of product there, but if you can get a little more competition, a few more plants, because they just don't till out in some of those tough areas. So up the rate there. And then went to canola. That was pretty simple because we relied on the Roundup Ready and other residuals. And then fall crops to try and compete against those broadleaves. I think I'll quickly go through these last 3 slides here. This was land we rent. It was dry land, became irrigation, and it was about intensively farming land around environmental needs and concerns, so creating wetlands outside of intensive farming zones. And one interest, so you can see those trees in that map there. So they did research on what grows best around some of these areas fastest, and how does it benefit the environment around it. So there's some really cool maps of checks they did for partridges actually. So this is kind of where things are planted, what is planted. This is Alberta Conservation Association, Lane Seward. This is from a presentation he did, so this is not my work. But Alberta Conservation Association. So this farm at Enchant, at its peak, prior to a decline after a couple of interesting weather years, was the highest per square foot or per kilometer in North America of partridges, actually. So if you can believe that, it did go down, but these dots on these maps are showing how where those birds are spotted and recorded. And then they can see, okay, what kind of habitat benefits these birds? How could you foster that bird? How far away from actual caraganas or things like that will they go into cropland? And so some of these fields it's not ideal for farming, but we've actually split up and put some caraganas or tree rows through the middle of some of these fields, which complicates farming, but the landowner really wanted it, and it was all to benefit the corridor flows for animals. So that was, quite interesting, I thought, and well, we get to rent some land, so that you win some, you lose some. It's good overall. So I think that's. I'll stop it there.
Awesome. All right, we're good. I'm going to take one of those mics. I thought the other one should work. What? Yeah. Oh, you want to do it? All right. All right, so before we get to the audience questions, I guess technology has changed a lot in agriculture. Even looking at what Greg's done, he did a little bit of the history of what he's adopted. So what has been the biggest win for you guys? What's been the thing that you've adopted that's been the easiest or the best for your operation? and because you're all kind of different sizes and different types of farming, it would all be different. I'll let you go one at a time. So you can start with Greg. That just needs to be turned on. Goes up. There you go.
Oh, good there.
Yeah.
Oh, the biggest win. I would have to say just yield mapping was really an eye opener to see what you can get where and how something you do can change something. So that was really an eye opener for us, I think. And but really that whole irrigation management, that's being able to remotely monitor and control irrigation, that really changed how we could manage the farm as well.
All right. Will?
Yeah, I guess for us, like the whole auto steer concept was important, you know, with the hybrid canola and some of the other crops we do, you know, it's really, you know, nice to have those rows straight and you know, you can seed one part of the field and then come back and do another part, and, you know, you don't necessarily have to go all the way across the field. But also, you know, the remote monitoring of irrigation equipment, just like Greg mentioned, for us that was a big labor saver. You know, you could see results immediately by, you know, somebody didn't have to drive. We were usually driving 3 times a day. Somebody was driving, checking every pivot on the farm. And depending where our land was and who we were swapping land with, sometimes that would be a 100-kilometer, you know, round trip, you know, loop to check all those pivots. So if you did that 3 times a day, you know, that's a lot of driving, a lot of time. So we probably cut that down to once a day now with the remote monitoring, and then, you know, and we'll go out whenever there's problems, but and we'll check them all every day just to check on things, but that's been a big thing. Plus the fact that we can move the pivot while we're out in the field spraying. You could just, on your sprayer, you know, you start up your pivot, move it dry to the place where you've already been, and you don't have to get out and walk through what you've already sprayed, you know, to go to the pivot point, turn on the pivot to move it. Or if you want, you're standing on the road in your pickup and you see that the end gun isn't quite adjusted properly, it's hitting part of the neighbor's field, you can just adjust your end gun, you know, while you're sitting in your pickup instead of having to walk all the way to the pivot point to change it there. So as far as labor savings and time savings, that's been the biggest factor on our farm.
All right, what about you, Lance?
Weighing everything, and having it tied in back to a system to, you know, record the weights of everything that you've fed that day and the weights of the cattle that have ran over the scale. But I think we're probably in the process of seeing a much more transformative thing happening with the, you know, with the facial recognition cameras in the next year. You know, we're going to be at the point where it's going to estimate weights of cattle just standing in the pens, and it's going to, you know, it tells you ones that are sick, and, you know, a pre-warning system that it's saying something hasn't went and ate or drank yet today as much, so you get a much earlier warning signal for sickness. I think that's going to be a lot more transformative change, but to date it's just, you know, being able to weigh everything in and out and tie that back to you know, a monitoring system that gives you a lot better data.
Yeah, all right, great. I guess the next question is, we've got a bunch of companies that are involved in precision agriculture. They're kind of leading the technology, but what's the one thing that you guys don't have that you see that you wish someone would want to do or help you out? Besides labor, because none of them do labor, we know that. But what would be the one thing that would make your operation better? We'll start with Greg again, or Will, sure.
Yeah, I hadn't given it a lot of thought really, but I think if there was some sort of system of tying all the record keeping and all the field operations and everything that happens, you know, if that could all be kind of tied together and kind of recorded automatically, you know, to so that you can look back and say, okay, I seeded that field at that rate at that time, without, you know, having to look it up in so many different ways and different systems.
Go ahead.
Well, I think we're in the process of solving what my biggest problem is, and that would be, you know, traceability of everything. And again, I'm pumping the tires a lot of one cup here, but you know, it's going to solve a lot of problems for us. You know, you're going to be able to trace that animal's health and weight and sickness and breeding events and calving events, and it's going to eliminate a lot of data entry. You know, it correlates the dangle tag with the, you know, the actual facial recognition of the animal and creates a file for you that you can, you know, add your info to and follow that animal through its whole life. And the more that system grows to where more people have it, the more powerful it becomes. So I think we're on the verge of actually solving the problem that I see is I'd like to solve. So hopefully, at least, I'm pretty optimistic about that at least.
That's the pressure for you.
Yeah, I'm going to be similar to Will on the whole record keeping thing. That is a big challenge, and making things work together. Even royalty reporting, you know, all the seed companies we work with, they all want royalties reported in different ways, and they want different information, and there's different forms to sign for every company, from just their trade agreements to a midge stewardship to, it just gets really messy, all the stuff that you have to do in the seed industry. But just farming alone, just getting some of that information together would be quite nice.
So it's kind of like the way Alex
Irrigation
said,
records.
you've got the car. I don't know if you saw Alex's presentation
Yes.
earlier, but the car that's all in parts. You need the car all in one piece, basically.
Yeah, I liked his picture there.
Yeah.
I liked his presentation.
Yeah. Okay. So now we're going to open it up to you guys. If you have any questions for any one of these gentlemen, Denise has got the mic, and go ahead and just put up your hand, and she'll find you. Yeah. Anyone?
Someone's got to start us off.
Hello. Hey, so this question will be more geared toward the challenges that you have, and it'd be kind of precision ag based, but a lot of precision ag is focused around doing more with less. You hear that a lot. So one of the comments up there was, you know, with precision technology, you don't have time to do certain things. So maybe around the staff shortages, I'm with an educational institution, what type of staff are you looking for that would help you be able to adopt more of these precision ag technologies?
Yeah, from a staffing standpoint, it's some of it's continuity. It's just retaining people, which hasn't been too bad. But yeah, I mean, if I could hire a college diploma person or a university, like any of that post-secondary education, phenomenal. But you also, I mean, everyone's got a different skill set, so they can all fit in different roles. Like for me, I'm not going to fix a machine. I'm not a great mechanic, but I can sell seed. So everyone's got kind of a different role. As farms get bigger, you can get put in those roles a little bit easier. So really for us, it's anything from someone who's able to manage irrigation or fix things well, or a bit of everything, machine operation to someone who doesn't mind to run a truck for part of the year, things like that. And some of it maybe is seasonal, where we get the right key seasonal people. But right now our harvest crew is a bit of a retirees club. My uncles, when they're not camping, some retired neighbors, on Saturday we'll get a guy who's taking accounting at university that helps us over the past few years, named Mark. He'll come out and run combine on a Saturday, and so feels like we have a pretty ragtag group sometimes. It's like, who's available? Oh, okay, we'll take you then. So that is challenging, but I find that every time we've implemented anything new in the business, you sometimes can get some more information, or you can get more information, but it requires more background work, and every single thing on the list requires more work than just the set it and forget it. So as we've done more precision ag things, we've also grown the farm, but it does feel like it requires a whole lot more work in general as you add on more layers of prescription type farming or advanced farming techniques or record keeping. Anyone else?
Yeah, just trying to eliminate that problem through some technology, I guess, is the cow-calf sector just doesn't have the profitability to hire too many people or pay too big of wages or anything. So yeah, a lot of our focus is doing more with less, and you gotta think about those decisions pretty closely, because yeah, you can fall into that trap, just like Greg said, where it actually adds more work. So I don't actually have an answer for that, but that is a very big consideration always.
Actually, no.
I do find too, for every time someone says, oh, you should try this will do this for you, or this or that, it's like, I just don't have time for that. Like, okay, show me some information, and sometimes the data is not great, and it's like, okay, let's just get back to basic farming here. And like that is the challenge, where you just kind of get tired out and you just say, let's just go back to basics. So that is a big challenge.
So really making it easy for you is the most important thing.
That's got to be the solution, yeah.
Yeah.
I mean,
Not complex.
That's worth money to make things less complex.
Yeah. All right, any other questions?
Oh, Will, you want to?
Oh, sorry, Will.
No, I was just going to say, follow up on that. Yesterday, in one of the presentations, it was mentioned that, like auto steer, you buy it, you plug it in, and it works, and it saves you time, and you can see the benefits. Some of the other things, have potential benefits, but they're a lot more work to put into place and to get any useful benefit out of, and and it takes a while before you ever get to the stage where it's actually saving you some time or making things more efficient.
So whatever product that you add to your farm, the salespeople need to basically help you get it into the place, so that it doesn't take all your time to do it, that they're there to help you, so then it gets into the operation faster. Yeah.
How does each of you figure out how much are you willing to invest? How do you figure out that return on investment ratio? For each of you, it must be different, but just are you willing to work with something for 3 years before it shows results? Like, a lot of these things can be expensive up front. What's your, how do you decide, okay, yeah, that one's worth it and that one's maybe not, kind of thing?
Yeah, I think that's very difficult to answer and different for everybody, but I think a lot of it is probably depends on how interested you are personally in that whole concept. And so even if the concept is extremely economically viable, but it's something you're not really interested in fooling around with, you're maybe not going to do it, even though it'll make you money. And conversely, there might be something that you're really interested in, doesn't really make you any money, but you still keep doing it, and you still keep fooling around with the technology because you enjoy doing it, or something that you're personally interested in.
Yeah, it's a big commitment to say yes to do something in this world, because it is such a lot of work to get things up to speed. So you really have to be confident in that product or that system. And so some things, are easier. You can make the, to get someone to create some zones and some prescriptions, and you can start to see that pretty quick. But say a record keeping, or how, to change that. How does that benefit you? How do you see dollars in that? That's very tough. But it's such a commitment to do something. And if it takes 3 years or 5 years, what percentage of your farming career is that, right? It is such a slow thing that 1 year is a lot of time. How many farming years do we have in us, right? Before you're slowing down or changing or transitioning to the next generation or someone else. So that is the challenge too, is that 1 year cycle is a long cycle.
Yeah, I echo what they said. I think what Will said is exactly spot on. There's some things that you're personally interested in that don't make as much sense as others that you ignore. And that's just the reality, and you gotta guard against that. And that's something you really gotta guard against.
Okay. Were there any other questions? I guess, Will, your picture, what you showed the... Oh, sorry. Sorry, Lauren.
Thank you. Maybe just a question in terms of autonomy. We get approached by a lot of companies interested in autonomous vehicles. Is that something you can see in the near future on your farms, or is that a long-term thing, or is that a never thing, just based on what you're doing right now with driving steel down a field compared to something really small autonomous? Just curious to know your opinion on that.
Well, as a cattle guy that doesn't really grow any cash crops, I don't have a lot of money invested into equipment, and compared to my other two counterparts here. But yeah, I mean that is something actually. But again, I think that goes back to the last question. That's something that interests me, right? So yeah, I'm right on that, especially for things like spraying and that sort of thing. So I do think it plays a role, because I look at my oldest daughter here is in college, and cow-calf sector, and I don't want to sound too doom and gloom, because I love the cow-calf sector, but it hasn't had the profitability in it that other sectors have had for quite a while now. And so it's a lot of work. You're tied down. I'm not quite so sure if my kids are too into that lifestyle, as that's been the problem forever. So how do you keep getting things done? And I think the next 10 years that could be one of the solutions. When I don't have a huge equipment base, I think that offers maybe a more affordable solution especially for things like spraying.
Yeah, that's a whole aspect of the industry that I don't think was ever talked about in this conference. You've got a few different ideas there, like the driverless tractors that are pulling the grain carts beside the combine. That's kind of one aspect, but the whole other aspect of having the the DOT system with the power unit that has its own seeding and harvesting equipment. And yeah, it'd be interesting to see where that goes. I'm not sure that we're going to see that large scale on fields in 5 years, but I would certainly think that between the 5 and 10 year span that it'll be fairly common for some field operations.
Yeah, I think if you could have one person operating 3 combines, right? So maybe it's not fully autonomous, but maybe you can have one good person that's remote, even in the field, remotely operating 3 machines at one time, and they do most of it, but they're there to solve problems or deal with the messy spots, right? And they might not be in any of those 3 combines. So potentially there's some advantages in that. It's the easy stuff, right? What's the easiest to pick off? And for a farm that's spread out, it's that moving from field to field that's the challenge. That is the big challenge on a spread out place. But I definitely think that will solve some of the potential problems. It will change your workforce to some degree too. You'll need better, more skilled employees and staff than even now. So it will change the workforce that's required on farms.